The wind howled through the trees as the last light of day faded over the Appalachian hills. Somewhere in the dense forest a sound echoed, a voice that mimicked a familiar tone, calling out a name that should have been safe. Every instinct screamed to run, but the hikers couldn't. Something was watching, and they weren't alone. If you're already feeling the chills, go ahead and hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story in our Appalachian Legends series. The Appalachian Mountains, stretching across the eastern United States, have always been home to dense forests, winding rivers, and isolated communities. For centuries, the region's isolation gave rise to folklore whispered around campfires, stories of creatures that lurked just beyond the reach of light. Among these legends, none is more feared than the Wendigo, a spirit of hunger, malice, and insatiable desire. Unlike the Wendigo tales from the far northern forests of the Algonquin tribes, the Appalachian Wendigo has a different presence. Locals describe it not as a tall, skeletal being, but as an unshakable sensation of being stalked. A shadow between the trees, eyes glowing in the darkness, and a sound, human yet impossible, echoing through the forest at night. In 1978, a small group of hunters set out near the border of West Virginia, deep into the highlands. They were experienced outdoorsmen, familiar with the mountains, the wildlife, and the unpredictability of the forest. But nothing in their experience prepared them for what they encountered. Their first signs were subtle. The tracks they found were unlike any animal they had ever seen. Long, clawed, and oddly human in shape, but far too large. The prints were interspersed with twisted branches, as if something, or someone, had been dragging itself along the forest floor. At first, they laughed it off, attributing it to a bear or some other large predator. But the forest has a way of revealing truths, slowly. If you're intrigued by these strange tracks and forest mysteries, go ahead and tap that like button. It really helps support the channel. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest seemed to take on a life of its own. Every rustle, every snap of a twig, every sudden gust of wind seemed deliberate, purposeful. The hunters tried to make sense of it, whispering to one another about bears or other wildlife. But the feeling of being watched never left. And then they heard it, a low, whispering sound that didn't resemble any animal. By nightfall, the forest transformed. Shadows grew longer, and the wind seemed to carry whispers. At first, it was indistinct, a rustling in the trees, the crackle of leaves. Then the sound became clearer, a voice, soft, familiar, calling the name of one of the hunters. He froze, staring into the darkness. The others heard it too, but no, one was near. The voice repeated, almost pleading. They could not identify where it came from. Panic set in. The hunters began to move back toward camp, flashlights cutting thin beams through the dense underbrush. But the voice followed them. Not just one voice, several, each imitating tones of friends, loved ones, even family members. It was impossible. Human voices, yet not human. And then they saw it, between the trees, eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. Too many eyes, bright, unblinking. The figure emerged briefly, a silhouette impossibly tall, unnaturally thin, its limbs moving with an eerie fluidity. They never heard it run. It simply glided, a presence that warped the forest around it. If you can imagine seeing something like this in the woods, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss the next chilling story in our Appalachian Legends series. By the time they returned to their cabin, none of them spoke. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Windows rattled as if the forest itself was breathing against them. Outside, the shadows seemed to shift, congregating along the tree line. Every sound was magnified, branches snapping, leaves rustling, the faintest echo of whispers. The next morning, they found something disturbing. Their supplies, food, tools, personal items were scattered, some partially torn apart. Large footprints encircled the cabin, leading into the thickest parts of the woods and disappearing. One hunter claimed to see marks on the walls, deep, gouged scratches, but no entry point. Over the next few days, more signs appeared. The local townspeople, upon hearing their story, were wary but unsurprised. Many knew of the old tales, the warnings passed down for generations. If you hear a familiar voice in the woods, an elder said, it's not a friend calling, it's something hungry. The hunters decided to document everything. They set up cameras and left recording devices around the cabin and along the trails. Night after night, the devices captured strange noises, whispers, low growls, branches snapping, and what sounded like distant footsteps. Yet every morning, no physical evidence of a creature was found. Just the inexplicable, unnerving sensation that something had been there. Do you want to see more of these real-life Appalachian encounters? Hit like and leave a comment telling us which story you'd like us to cover next. Despite attempts to capture evidence, the hunters found nothing visible. Cameras showed nothing beyond shadows. Recordings of the voices were incoherent, like whispers carried by wind, layered and overlapping. But the fear was real, tangible. One of them began to have nightmares, seeing the glowing eyes between trees, hearing the mimicry of his own voice calling from nowhere. Stories like these persisted in the Appalachians. Farmers, hunters, and hikers would report similar incidents, sounds of someone or something, following, calling their names, but vanishing when approached. Shadowy figures lurking just beyond vision, retreating when confronted, yet always returning to watch. Some local historians dug into older accounts, finding records from the 1800s of travelers and settlers who described nearly identical experiences. Voices in the woods, missing livestock, and strange tracks that disappeared without explanation. One diary entry from 1873 described a settler who was called by his late brother's voice into the woods and was never seen again. If these historical connections are giving you chills, make sure to like the video and subscribe. More Appalachian horror stories are coming. The Wendigo in these accounts is not just a creature. It is a force, one that embodies the isolation, the hunger, and the hidden danger of the Appalachian wilderness. Some say it preys on greed, on indulgence, on those who wander too far into the woods. Others claim it feeds not on flesh alone, but on fear itself. By the early 1980s, the story had spread beyond the Appalachian region. Local newspapers recounted unexplained disappearances. Hikers vanished without trace, leaving only torn clothing and footprints that led nowhere. Experts in folklore noted that while the Wendigo was primarily associated with northern forests, The Appalachian variants were persistent. They adapted, they were localized, and they were terrifying. For modern explorers and thrill seekers, the Appalachian Wendigo is a cautionary tale. People travel to the forests hoping to capture evidence, to witness the unknown. But the mountains are vast, shadows are thick, and sometimes the stories are right. Something does watch at night. Something that can imitate voices, lure wanderers deeper, and vanish without a trace. Local authorities, often skeptical, have occasionally recorded unusual disturbances, broken branches, unidentifiable tracks, eerie howls that cannot be attributed to known wildlife, while skeptics call it misidentification or exaggeration. The consistent reports from independent witnesses cannot be ignored. To this day, the legend endures. Campers in the Appalachian Mountains warn newcomers, if you hear your name called in the dark, don't answer. Just keep moving. And while the forest seems serene by day, at night the mountains are alive with unseen eyes, voices that imitate the familiar and the persistent hunger of something that is never quite human. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon. There are many more Appalachian legends waiting in the next videos.